My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is the Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa webinar. The way I structure this webinar: before the application, during the application, and after the approval. We're going to talk about definitions, the consulates, the different residency status, entering as a tourist, tax considerations, eligibility for the non-lucrative visa, and requirements and documentation. Then we're going to talk about the timing, the application process, and how you arrive to Spain, the renewal process, if you plan to stay longer, long-term residency, citizenship, and potentially transitioning to work permits. The content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate requirements. And a little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014, and we have amazing reviews out there. About 250 reviews, 248 of 250 are 5-star reviews, so you're in very good hands. And if you want to leave a review after you watch this webinar, you can always do it in the button on the top, in the green bar. The red button will redirect you to Trustpilot, where you can leave a nice review that really helps and motivates me to continue. Now you can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. There's so many things you can use. You can join our weekly newsletter, free newsletter that I send every Monday, where I feature the top discussions on social media, most watched video of the week, and investigation blog posts. Our YouTube channel with more than 1,000 videos, half of them are for the non-lucrative visa. Blog posts, almost 2,000 articles, and Facebook groups, from which probably the biggest Spanish non-lucrative visa dedicated group with almost 24,000 members. I highly recommend you joining today. You can do it right here. Also, I recently released a few sections that are relevant for this webinar. The first one, you can join 6 webinars, all for free, every 15 days. The newsletter and the step-by-step move to Spain checklist that shows you what to do and when, starting 1 year before your intended move date to Spain, okay? And in every single step, I feature videos, information, and vetted professionals that can help you with that specific step. Also, I released 13 destinations where I look at the cost of living, I look at many different things for 13 places in Spain, which are the most popular ones. Probably 95% of expats move to these places in Spain, and I will be adding more and more in time. So all this for absolutely free. Now, if you plan to receive expert help, and I highly recommend you to engage with professionals of at least immigration lawyers, tax advisors. Those two, in my opinion, you have to engage before even deciding moving to Spain, so that you make sure that what you have in your plans makes sense, okay? So it's important that you at least have a consultation with immigration experts and tax experts, not the ones recommended by Spainguru. I don't tell you to do that with mine. Of course, if you do it, absolutely grateful for you to do it, and you're in very good hands. But in general, talk to an immigration lawyer and talk to a tax advisor. That's the minimum thing that I highly recommend you to do. Then you can find personally vetted by me. Most of them I have been recommending them for several years. I have financial planners, NLD compliant health insurance, exclusive agent, medical certificates, sworn translations, apostle services in the US and the UK, all those you will need for the application of this visa, and many other services like bank accounts, money transfer services, property rentals, mortgages if you plan to purchase property in Spain, and so much more, all personally vetted by me. So all those services are, of course, professional services. You have to pay for those, but for all the rest, 99% of what you find on Spainguru.es is for absolutely free. So definitely worth checking it out. Now let's start with the presentation. So before the application, different considerations. What is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? It's a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. It is defined by 2 laws. The most important is the organic law for 2000. And then lower in hierarchy is the regulation, el reglamento de extranjería. The reglamento de extranjería has recently changed, effective starting last May 20th, 2025, okay? But the main organic law didn't change, and that has strong repercussions in a few things. We're gonna talk in depth later on. Now, if you're planning to apply for the non-lucrative visa, you must know that you cannot do it from within Spain, unless you're a holder of a Spanish residency and you're modifying that residency for a non-lucrative residency. But if you're applying for the first time, you have to do it either from the consulate that serves the area where you are a legal resident. For example, if you come from Atlanta, Georgia, within the area of Georgia, you have the Miami consulate that works with a third party called BLS, right? Or if you're passport holder of another country, for example, you are American, but you also hold the passport of Colombia, potentially you could apply from a Colombian consulate, let's say from a Spanish consulate in Colombia. Okay, that's another option. Okay. Now, on Spainguru.es, I have dedicated pages for every consulate in those 4 countries, USA, UK, Canada, and Australia. And why is it so interesting? Because not only I put all the relevant official links, okay, but also if you search for your specific consulate, you go to guides, visa guides, Spanish non-lucrative visa, NLV consulates, and then you can choose your consulate. And once you have found your consulate, for example, this is Los Angeles, you will find featured first-hand experiences. And it is very important that you read those first-hand experiences because every consulate is different and things change all the time. So it's important to have fresh experiences from other people who are going through this, who tell you tips, that can save you a lot of headaches. Now, many consulates, all of them in the UK and some of them in the US, work with BLS International. This is a third party, it's a private company from India that is in the Indian Stock Exchange. And it's a huge company with presence in 66 countries. They do the processing of many visas, okay? Sometimes the consulate can have only the processing of a Schengen visa and not the non-lucrative visa. Sometimes they process all the visas, so sometimes, like for example, New York City consulate, they don't work with BLS International. So it's important that you understand whether the non-lucrative visa is processed by BLS in your consulate, because you will have to deal with them directly and not with the consulate, if that is the case, right? So another thing that you need to have in mind is Schengen area. Schengen area is an area of 29 countries in Europe that is internally borderless. Okay? And as of 2025, those are the countries that are part of the Schengen area. And you need to have that in mind as well, because when you enter Spain, it's important whether you do it from outside or from inside Schengen. We're going to talk about that later on. Now, let's talk about different immigration status. You can enter Spain as a tourist or holding a visa or holding a residency, right? What are these different things? First of all, if you are British, US, Canadian, Australian citizen, for example, you don't need a Schengen visa to enter Spain as a tourist or to enter the Schengen zone. You can maximum stay in the Schengen zone for up to 90 days rolling period within a 6-month period. After that period, you have to leave the Schengen area, okay, and leave enough time in order to gain more days, okay? This is a rolling period. Now, some nationalities will require a Schengen visa to enter as tourists this area, and that includes Spain, okay? For example, the Philippines, right? Now, if you plan to stay longer than 90 days, specifically in Spain, you need to obtain a visa that grants you the right to obtain a residency attached to it. What is the difference between the visa and the residency? The visa is the paper that is sticked on your passport that has a validity period and is obtained at a Spanish consulate to enter Spain. The residency, right, is the permit that gives you the permission to stay in Spain more than 90 days, right? So first you obtain the non-lucrative visa, and once you enter Spain, you have officially 30 days to obtain the residency card that proves your residency status, okay? And it has a certain validity date and you will have to renew, right? So every residency that is less than 5 years in Spain is considered to be a temporary visa. Therefore, the non-lucrative is a temporary visa, right? More than 5 years is a long-term residency, also known as permanent residency, right? Now, it's important to understand that if you are a citizen of a European Union country or associate country, or you're married to a passport holder of an EU country, this visa, non-lucrative visa, is not for you because there is permit, okay? You can, as an EU passport holder, or if you're married to one, okay, you can use the tarjeta familiar comunitario, okay, piggybacking your spouse, okay, or stable couple, to stay in Spain. And if you have the option to obtain an EU passport, you don't need the non-lucrative visa because you have the right to stay in Spain. If you plan to retire in Spain and not work in Spain, you have to have certain amount of money, around 7,200 euros in your bank, which is much less than the non-lucrative visa requirements. You will get a permit for 5 years. You will not have to renew it. You will have work permit. So it's completely different. So if you have the possibility to obtain an EU passport or to come with a spouse or couple that has a EU passport, explore that pathway instead of a non-lucrative visa, right? Now, if you're a non-EU passport holder, non-lucrative visa is one of the options to stay in Spain more than 90 days. Let's talk about some more considerations. Let's talk about tax residency in Spain. It's very important. You become a tax resident in Spain if you comply with any of these three conditions. What happens when you become a tax resident in Spain? You will have to pay taxes to the Spanish authorities on your global income and potentially on the net value of your assets. What are the three conditions? The most important, if you spend over 183 days in Spain within a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, okay? Those days don't need to be consecutive and they are regardless of your immigration status. So time spent as a tourist in Spain count towards tax residency, and they need to be added to any other day that you spend in Spain from January 1st to December 31st, right? So be careful. When you set your foot in Spanish soil, that time is counting for tax residency. Then another condition would be your main economic activity or primary income source is from Spain. And the third one is if your family lives in Spain. A little bit about taxes that you have to have in mind. Most important one is income tax. The annual income tax is paid on June 30th, and you have to pay your tax is calculated using progressive rates that range from 19% to 47%, depending on the region. Okay, you have the Form 720. You will have to disclose the value of your assets outside of Spain by different categories. For example, bank accounts, properties, crypto, if the total category is 50,000 euros or more. Wealth tax is a regional tax. So depending where you move, you will have to pay it or not. Okay, you will be liable or not. Madrid and Andalusia are the most favorable places in Spain to move, referring to the wealth tax. Okay, so they don't have it or they started at 3 million euros. And then there is the national solidarity tax, which is a nationwide wealth tax that starts at 3 million euros. Okay, these are ballpark figures just to make it simple. Remember that Spain has double taxation agreements with USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and many more countries to avoid you from being taxed twice on the same thing. That doesn't mean you will pay less taxes. It just means that you will pay taxes to where you are a tax resident, okay, usually first. And then you will credit what you have paid in the original jurisdiction towards a second jurisdiction if you still have to pay taxes. That is the case of Americans, because just by the simple fact of having an American passport, you have to file taxes anyways, okay, every single year. If you want to know more about taxes, I have my bi-weekly taxes webinar that you can join for absolutely free. And I also send you a recording, and I also have a Q&A session. Now, let's go deeper into the non-lucrative visa application. Let's talk about documentation, and this is a summary list, okay? This is not an official list. First, they will ask you an address in Spain. Depending on the consulate, they may just be happy you telling them which city or province you are moving to, like Valencia or Seville. Some other consulates, like for example, Chicago, or I heard Boston or DC, they want also a rental agreement, okay, or property deeds if you're an owner of property, okay. But a lot of people choose to comply with this. And of course, it's risky to rent something before seeing it or before even being to Spain. It's very risky, okay? I have a video with Ainhoa Manero, expert immigration lawyer from Sternavas, and she says that her customers never show a rental agreement because this is an interpretation that shouldn't be that consulate should not have. It is a crazy interpretation, okay? And she always fights for this and she always wins, okay? So I let it there, that you know. Of course, if you plan to avoid any friction in your process and you want to comply, absolutely your call. But just know that some lawyers don't do it for their customers. Now, the second one, addressing country of residence. You need to prove that you are a legal resident within the area that the consulate jurisdiction. Okay, as I said before, for example, if you're living in London, your consulate is London, it's not Manchester, right? You cannot choose your consulate. You will need to prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and dependents, if applicable, okay, without working in Spain. Okay, this is what the law says. Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain, okay? Or if you're a UK retiree, you could use instead the S1 form that would grant you access to the public healthcare system in Spain. You will need to have a clean criminal background check, medical certificate where you prove that you're free of diseases that you could have serious public health repercussions. If you're planning to move with spouses or with children, you will need to show new marriage certificate copy or new birth certificate copies. All this sworn, translated and apostilled. And in many cases, you will have to promise via a letter of intent that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain. If applicable, you will also have to show more documentation, for example, depending on the consulate, school enrollment for your kids, rental contracts, as I mentioned before, tax filings as well from the past, etc., and also photographies, payments of the fees, etc., etc. That's an overview of the documentation that we'll need to show. I have recorded a couple of interviews with Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados, who I highly recommend, where she answers 55 frequently asked questions. That's on the Spainguru's YouTube channel. So I highly recommend you watching these two interviews. It's 20 minutes each, and I think it gives you so much context. Question: can you work part-time up to your departure to move into Spain? I will go through that later on. The answer is, it's a gray area. I will tell you. Depends on the consulate. Now, let's talk about financial requirements 2025. Proof of sufficient funds. How much money do you need to show? And this is based on an index that is published every year. It has been the same in the last 3 years. The main applicant needs to show 400% of the IPREM index 2025, and each dependent, so spouses, children, 100% of the IPREM index, right? This translated into euros is 28,800 euros for the main applicant and 7,200 euros for each dependent. For example, a couple would be 28,800 euros plus 7,200 euros. You can see on the right, 36,000 euros. That's the minimum financial threshold. How do you prove that you have the sufficient funds? This can be savings and or passive income. So any of those or a combination of both. Okay. For example, pension withdrawals, rental income, dividends, funds available by credit card as well. And each of the different income streams or where you have the money will require different documentation to prove basically that that money is readily accessible without penalties immediately by you. Okay, this is important that the authorities understand this. Normally, you will show bank statements and documentation from your bank, wherever the money is. Okay, some consulates will also ask for tax returns, as I mentioned, and something very important about the financial threshold is that potentially you will need to show double the amount of the initial application, more or less, okay, at the renewal. And the first renewal is just 1 year after you enter Spain, okay? And it will be renewed for 2 periods of 2 years each time. And since each renewal period is for 2 years, you will have to show that you can live in Spain without working, let's say, for 2 years. Therefore, if you have recurrent passive income, it's fine. But if you have just savings, you will have to have double the amount in savings than the initial application, because now you have to cover a larger or longer period, right? There are regional variations. These are screenshots from the Spanish Non-Lucrative visa group from Spainguru, okay, where people discuss, like Valencia, you only need 1 year's funds. For years 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Alicante, you need double the amount. In Almeria, you just need to show 1. So there are regional variations, okay, but have it in mind, okay? Now, the IPREM index tends to grow. You can see there the chart started, the start chart starts in 2004, went up, and now it's 600 euros per month, 7,200 euros per year. That's 100% of the IPREM, okay? But it could go up. It could go up next year. Depends if there is political agreement, because this index is linked to the national budget. And in order to have a new national budget, you need the political parties to agree. They haven't had agreement in the last 3 years. Therefore, the IPREM has been frozen. But in 2026, it could go up to 650 to 700 euros. Okay, it's realistic. And that will have an impact in your application or renewals, okay? Because the financial thresholds is linked is a percentage of the IPREM index. It is not a monetary value, let's say, directly. Now, after May 20th, many consulates started to require also extra documentation from the banks in terms of certificates, because they want to see that you are the real owner of the bank account that you are using to show that you have enough money or you have enough recurrent income. So they want all the documentation to match, okay? This is the idea. And I'm here posting the screenshot of London Consulate, for example. If you go to Manchester Consulate, they haven't updated their website, but they are asking for this documentation. So this is why you need to be in the community. because the authorities in Spain sometimes are a bit messy. They just forget things, and then they will require those things, and they will reject your application because you are not submitting those things that they didn't ask you. Okay, but the best, of course, is to reduce friction. So be part of a community and read the requirements, official requirements from the consulate, from BLS, and also what other people say. And that's why it's so important to read the first-hand experience from people like you applying at those consulates. And they're requiring for full bank name and address, full account identification, account opening date and closing date if applicable, and the most controversial ones, a certificate from the bank stamped with the balance as of December 31st of the previous year, an average balance or average monthly balance for the previous year as well. So they want to, let's see a traceability of your money in time, right? Now, it is very common that Spanish banks provide certificates like this with a stamp. This is my bank, right? I got this screenshot from my mobile phone, okay? And they send you this digital certificate with a stamp, which is digital really, but it looks like an old, back in the day stamp. And this is what the authorities like to see. Unfortunately, only Spanish banks do this. No other banks do it, okay? In the US, in the States, in the UK, Canada. So it has been quite controversial and, quite nervous-wracking for many to provide this kind of certificates. Now, for some reason, it's not loading the screenshot, but this is a screenshot of a video of an interview to Ainhoa Manero that you can watch, where she's talking about the new requirements. But basically, what she's saying, Ainhoa Manero, expert immigration lawyer, she's saying that in the countries where the applicants cannot submit stamped certificates showing average balances of the previous year or the balance of December 31st, she's showing the closest thing that you can, okay? And so that authorities understand that you're doing an effort to provide this information so that everything matches. You can also make it more official, okay? For example, your bank doesn't provide average balance per month for the previous year. Make an Excel sheet, calculate the balances, bring that Excel sheet to the bank, see if they can stamp it, okay? If not, go to a notary, notarize it, okay? Sworn translate it, possible, and make it look official, so that the officer reviewing your case says, okay, this person is providing this because it's impossible for them to obtain the certificate from the bank. Okay, so this is what she's saying. So I highly recommend you watching this interview. Unfortunately, the screenshot is not there, but basically it's a screenshot of me and her being in the same video, okay, like this one, for example. Now we're moving to another very commonly asked question, is that, can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? And it is a gray area, right? Especially now that there is a digital nomad visa for people who are working remotely for non-Spanish companies, right? But this has been very new type of visa and residency. And the law says for the non-lucrative visa that you cannot work, referring to Spain. And there is a Supreme Court ruling stating literally that you can work. They don't care if you're working outside of Spain for a non-Spanish company on a remote basis under the non-lucrative residency. It's no problem, actually. Okay, so as long as for the renewals or for the application, you don't use active income, okay? If you renew your visa using savings, using passive income, etc., it's fine, okay? And actually know many people who do this, okay, or have done this in the past, and it is happening, and it is a gray area. This is the situation today. If you're in this situation or potentially thinking of being in this situation, I highly recommend you going with an experienced lawyer that understands exactly the nuances of the law and who tells you what is safe and what is not, okay? I'm not recommending you to do it, but I'm telling you and stating the facts, the legal facts, that it is a gray area, right? Now, if you're applying for the non-lucrative visa and even create the slightest doubt that you are working or you plan to work, you may be denied very, very quickly, okay? So be careful with that, because the consulates tend to be very, very paranoid. Especially the younger you are, the more scrutiny you face. And these are more examples on how crazy the differences are between the different consulates and how people who are working, actively working, still get the non-lucrative visa. The case of Edinburgh Consulate, it was a case of a family who got the non-lucrative residency via this consulate that officially states you can work in the UK if your work has the particularity that you have to travel back and forth, etc., etc. This was the case of someone working at an oil rig or oil platform in the North Sea. So the husband goes every 15 days to the North Sea, works in the oil rig, and comes back to Spain, and everybody is on the non-lucrative residency. And this is official. This is Edinburgh only, right? But also interviewing lawyers, they told me that depending on the type of work, for example, if you're a pilot, for example, you need to travel every 2 months and maybe do a couple of long-haul flights from the States, anywhere else, etc., they have had approvals, okay, on the non-lucrative visa, right? So if you're in this situation, go with legal help. Experienced lawyers, of course, that you can find on Spainguru. Now let's talk about private health insurance requirements. There are certain conditions, okay? First of all, if you're a UK retiree, you can use the S1 form instead. But if you're not, you have to have a private health insurance with certain requirements. The conditions are no co-payments, potentially no reimbursements, and on the right you have a screenshot from Houston where they talk about not having reimbursement clauses. So it's a little bit, depending on the consulate, the reimbursement thing. This is a risk to have it. Second one, no waiting periods. So you have to be covered from the moment in which you set foot in Spain. And third, full coverage with nuances. Okay, and we're going to talk about that. Normally, in 99% of cases, you have to pay the yearly payment, 1 yearly payment in advance, the full policy, okay? Because the company requires that in order to issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish with the right wording that is necessary to apply for the Spanish non-lucrative visa, okay? Now, let's talk about frequently asked questions. Are my medicines cost covered? If you're a holder of a private health insurance in Spain, no, you have to pay retail price, okay? The good news are that the prices of medicines in Spain are much lower than in the States, for example, okay? What should be the health insurance start date? Many answers to this question. Many people say that when you are in the appointment at the consulate, your policy has to be active already. But is this, depending on the consulate, that could also be risky because you are using time of that coverage without being in Spain. Therefore, it doesn't cover the full year in Spain once you arrive later. So the general, let's say, I would say the most consensus is that you have to start the policy the first day of the month in which you intend to move to Spain. For example, you intend to move on December 15th, starting on December 1st. Okay, you have to guesstimate that you will have your non-lucrative visa and that you will be able to move on a certain date. Okay, this is the most common answer to the question. Okay, where are the health insurance for older than 75 of age? I heard that DKV and Adeslas have options that are approved for this process. What if I have pre-existing conditions? Very important. And circling back to the full coverage condition. Okay, now it will depend how severe your pre-existing condition is. I will give you an example. If you have had cancer diagnosed in the previous 5 years, for sure, almost for sure, you will not obtain a private healthcare that will give you a coverage or a policy, okay? Because that pre-existing condition is too serious. Now, if you have a less serious pre-existing condition, like for example, high blood pressure, okay, these kind of things, usually what they do is that they will exclude those pre-existing conditions, but still they will be able to issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish that is enough to obtain a non-lucrative visa, even if you're excluded a certain pre-existing condition. Now, if you move to Spain with this policy, if you have anything related to this pre-existing condition, you will have to pay the treatment out of pocket. Okay, you will not be covered, right? But still, you would have gotten your non-lucrative visa, right? Can I pay into the Spanish public system? The advantages is that the pre-existing conditions will be covered, okay? The medicines cost will not be subsidized under the Convenio Especial, okay, which is the scheme that grants you access to the Spanish public healthcare system. After 1 year of residence in Spain, you can pay 60 euros per month if you're younger than 65, up to 157 euros per month if you're older than 65 years of age. And then you will have coverage from the Spanish public healthcare system for the treatment, okay? Therefore, that's what many people do. They get the private health insurance, then they enroll in the public system, okay? Now, be careful about the first renewal. Don't count on the public healthcare system to use it as one of the conditions for the renewal, because it usually takes longer than a week or 2 or months, okay? Therefore, your renewal will come before you have effective access to the public healthcare system. Okay, so be careful with that. Normally, the first renewal, you always have to do it with the private health insurance as well. So there's probably an overlap there in costs and coverage. Okay. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and the USA? Short answer is, if it's NLV compliant, yes. The long answer, bad news, I don't recommend it because of many different things, many different problems that you find on the way. It could be considered to be a travel health insurance by the Spanish authorities. The certificate of coverage usually is not issued in Spanish. It is usually in English. You will have to swap translate it. You won't have the right wording that the consulates want. Okay. Probably they have some co-payment clauses that if the officer starts to review in depth, can deny you. Okay. So I highly don't recommend it. Use a Spanish company that is used to provide this kind of policy. And of course, you can find on Spainguru, yes. Now, can I apply with a UK S1 form if I am a UK retiree? Yes, you can do it. You start the process in the UK and you finalize it once you are in Spain. So having started the process, it's enough for you to apply for a non-lucrative visa without having to hire a private health insurance. Do I need a Spanish bank account to hire a health insurance? No, you don't. You don't have to have one. Can I pay on a monthly basis? Now, most of the health insurance policies will require a full year in advance, okay? Maybe once you are in Spain, later on, once you have a Spanish IBAN, they let you pay on a monthly basis and still issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish that you need for the renewals. Can there be reimbursements? As I said, it is a gray area. I don't recommend taking the risk. Depending on the consulate, they've been outspoken about this, clear about not having reimbursements, but it would depend on the officer how he takes it, okay? Will I get a refund if I'm denied? Right, so many people ask this in the communities, but this is because they don't want to, they didn't read their contracts that they're signing. You know, they're hiring a policy from Sanitas, Adeslas, from BKV. There's many companies and many different policies with different cancellation or refund clauses, right? So you have to read the contracts, right, to know what is it going to happen if you are denied this visa, okay, and you get your money back, right? So the different cancellation clauses exist. There are like partially refund clauses. There are clauses with conditions. For example, you have to have been denied because of a private health insurance, no any other denial reason. Otherwise, you don't get any refund, okay? Or you will get a refund without the taxes, etc., etc. Okay, so always check the cancellation/refund clause and check every single clause in your contract. Read it. Okay, it's very, very important, right? If you work with my recommended exclusive agent, there is a full refund clause, where you just show that you have been denied. It doesn't matter why, okay? But you need to show just the letter of the consulate where it states that your visa has been denied. With that letter, you will get a full refund, okay? What are the top companies in Spain for health insurance? The biggest is Adeslas, then you have Asisa, BKV, ASA, Salus, Caser, Sanitas, AXA, MAFRE. Long story short, all these companies are very similar, okay? They're good, all of them, okay? I have lived in Spain for 21 years, and I have used 3 companies, and all of them were more or less the same, okay? So, you know, and they change depending on the year. They do some negotiation with a specific hospital in your region or with different doctors, or your doctor stops working with your company and starts working in another. So there is some dynamism there that you need to have in mind. Of course, choose your best option, but generally I would tell you that they are generally all pretty good, okay? But if size matters, Adeslas is by far the largest one, the most chosen one, not only by expats but also by Spaniards. I recently ran a poll, and Adeslas was the top choice for expats as well, under non-lucrative visa. Probably the best cost-effective health insurance policy, okay, that is compliant in the expat groups. Now, some people reported for the Washington DC and also Manila in the Philippines, and I'm not sure if any other consulate, that BLS website tried to sell them a travel health insurance. Don't buy this, because this is not accepted for the non-lucrative visa application, right? And even the same consulate that is trying to sell you the travel health insurance, in their official documentation says that travel health insurance will not be accepted. No travel insurances with medical assistance coverage will be accepted, okay? So don't pay attention to this pop-up that sometimes appears, okay, in this consulate that people reported, because this is not a compliant health insurance, right? As I mentioned, if you need a compliant health insurance, I highly recommend you working with my recommended exclusive Adeslas agent, Mr. Carlos Blanco, with wonderful reviews out there. And he has several advantages, and that's why I recommend him, because he's an expert immigration lawyer. He understands everything about immigration, specifically about non-lucrative visa. He can give you start date extensions, and this is a very common problem, that they only give you 1 month to start the policy, and then you start paying without using it. Now, Carlos can give you extensions in the future if you need, and he offers Adesla, which is the most popular option and probably the most cost effective. Okay, so wonderful reviews out there of people working with him. So yeah, definitely go on Spainguru.es, and it is non-binding quotes. There's no obligation in it. Just contact him via Spainguru and get a quote and see if that works. I'm sure you're gonna have the best service there. Now let's talk about medical certificate. This is a different thing. It's a different document. It has a 3-month validity since the day in which it was issued, and you need to submit it within validity. Okay, excuse me. Now, depending on the country where you're applying from and the type and the doctor that you are using, has to go in one way or another. Okay, this certificate says that you don't have infectious diseases, right? So it can come in English or Spanish or in both. Okay, most consulates have an official template. Sometimes the template is only in English. Sometimes the template is in 2 languages, right? If you use the template in 2 languages, you will avoid having to sworn translate it, saving some bucks, right? But you have to sign both parts. On the right, you can see a template in both languages. It has to have a specific wording, okay? So don't let the doctor change it. They cannot add like "to the best of my knowledge" or stuff like that. No. Choose the official wording, okay? Avoid any headaches. Make it signed by the real doctor, not by the front desk person. And make it stamp it if you can, okay? So in the USA, you don't need to apostille it. You need to print it in the doctor's with the doctor's letterhead, okay, and use the doctor's stamp so it looks official, and that's enough. And if it's only in English, it's not translated. But in the UK, you also need to apostille it, okay? It's not the case in Australia or Canada or USA or many other countries, but in the UK, the doctors can be registered at the Foreign Office, so this is FCDO registered, and the consulates from Spain require that this certificate is apostilled as well, okay? And also sworn translated if it's not only in English, right? Now, if you need UK doctors, you can find on Spainguru.es, online service, all FCDO registered, and also you can find private UK apostille services as well on Spainguru.es. Now, there's also another option, which is using a Spanish doctor. Of course, if you go to Spainguru.es, I put you in contact with one, okay? You just fill the form and you say which consulate you are applying from. There's several advantages to using the Spanish doctor. First, it's fully online. Second, it's in Spanish, the certificate. You don't need to sworn translate it. And third, you don't need to apostille it, okay? Now, some consulates, again, had some crazy interpretations, okay? This was the case of Manchester, for example, in the past, that they said that when the certificate was issued, you had to be physically in Spain, okay? But for example, London and Edinburgh, they don't require this. Miami doesn't require this. Toronto doesn't require this, okay? Many consulates. So if you need to use a Spanish doctor or you're interested in using one, when you fill the form via Spainguru, you have to select the consulate, and then the doctor will tell you, yes, my certificate is accepted in your consulate, even if you're not physically in Spain when I issue it, okay? So yes. FAQs. My doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? Change doctor. My doctor is not FCDO registered in the UK. Is his certificate valid? No, because you need to apostille it. And for that, the doctor needs to be registered. How do I know the Spanish doctor certificate is accepted at my consulate? Fill the form, state your consulate, where you're applying from, and the doctor will tell you directly his experience. And this is a table that summarizes everything that I just said. Now, there are strange cases. As I mentioned, in the US, you don't need to apostille medical certificates. In the UK, you need to. But someone in Chicago in the US was required by the Spanish authorities, by the Foreign Office in Spain, okay, apparently, to apostille the certificate, okay? And this person had to run to a notary public, get it notarized, get the apostille for the notarization, and supply this document, okay? This was a strange case that I bring you to your attention in case, these things can happen, okay? Now, but of course, in the US, everyone that is applying is not apostilling the medical certificates. This was an outlier and very strange case, apparently. Now, clean criminal background check. Let's talk about that. This document usually is the one that takes the longest to obtain. In the States, the FBI background check, you obtain it very quickly. You can obtain it electronically after fingerprinting. but then the apostille takes several weeks if you do it directly as the state of apostille with the state of Department of State. Okay, you have private apostille services that do it only in 10 days. You can find them on Spainguru.es, but yet they take a long time. Okay, in the case of the US, it's the apostille. In the case of the acro in the UK, they take a few weeks as well, and now they're charging for it 150 pounds if I'm not wrong. They changed this, and then you have to apostille it. Okay, and in any case, you have to sworn translate it into Spanish, right? Now, usually the police checks have 6-month validities, okay, periods, and they need to be valid when you submit them. But always check the official requirements. I can be making a mistake, and they're maybe only valid for 3 months, okay? They must be squeaky clean for the last 5 years, so nothing in the last 5 years, right? Now, if you have stuff, okay, records, prior to those 5 years, it will depend how serious those records are. If they are very serious, conviction time, blood crimes, stuff like that, it's a straight denial, okay? Even if that happened many decades ago, right? And if you have, let's say, smaller things, misdemeanors, like driving under the influence, stuff like that, smoking pot outside of a university many years ago, usually there's no problem, okay? But if you have records, always go with legal help, because lawyers can help you make the consulate understand that enough time has passed, okay, to put it shortly. Now, if you have something serious, go through the expungement processes of your countries to delete those records. If it is legal to have them deleted, delete them first and then apply for the visa. Because if you have those records, you will be denied, right? Now, am I still eligible with records on my background check? I just answered that question. Am I still eligible with a no live trace? This is for the acro. Sometimes the records enough time passed, and the acro in the UK writes no live trace, okay? So there's something behind that annotation. So sometimes the the consulates in the UK ask for more clarifications about what type of record you have under or behind that no live trace. So it's better to provide that report as soon as possible. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille? No, not at the Department of State, but as I said, there are private apostille services in the UK that will get you your federal apostille in 10 days. You can find on Spainguru.es. Can I notarize the background check and use a state apostille instead? This was done in the past, not anymore. You will be denied. Use always federal background check. Where can I have my fingerprints taken in the US? You can use the post office, or you can use channelers. You have an FBI page with the approved channelers that also take your fingerprints, okay? And usually you will receive your FBI background check on your email during the same day. And you can just print out that email, put it in an envelope, and send it to the Department of State to get the apostille, right? Or to a private service, as I said, as well, right? I have articles on how to do all this on Spainguru.es. Just send me an email and I send you the links. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Same stories. Well, some senior people get their fingerprints, they fade out with time, and they're not easily scanned. I have a few articles as well about this with potential solutions. Send me an email if that is your case. Now, about criminal background check. In the UK, it was taking 5 to 6 weeks, sometimes 7 weeks. Okay, there is a service to get it faster, I think, but I don't know. Some people reported that it's not working very, very well. In Canada, it is now very fast, and obtaining the apostille is also very fast. It used to take much longer. And as I say, in the States, you get the background check very quickly after fingerprinting. You get the original, let's say, digital version, and then what takes time is the apostille process. Now, and coming back to the question of Law 1313, can I work part-time up to your departure to move into Spain? So I understand that you mean by that question is that you apply for the Non-Lucrative visa, you let it processing, and you're still working part-time during that processing time. That's what I understand. Right now, it will depend on the consulate and on the mood of the officer reviewing your case. This would be the shortest question. Okay, it will depend on the consulate. Now, this is also called, this visa, the retirement visa, because most of the people choose this type of visa because they have a pension and they want to retire in Spain. But it is not a requirement that you are a pensionist to use this visa. You could be in your 20s, and if you comply with the requirements, funding requirements and other requirements, it's perfect, right? But you will face more scrutiny from the consulates because they may doubt or think that you want to work really, right? And that could be a denial visa. Now, if you're a retiree, pensionist, if you show proof of receipt of a pension, everything is fine. Okay, it's a straightforward case. Now, if you're still working, in the UK, they will require you to show a P45 form. In most of cases, in the US, a resignation letter or termination letter from your employer, both translated and notarized. If you're freelancers in the US, a notarized affidavit promising not to work. In the UK, a letter from HMRC, an accountant stating having ceased trading and registered for self-employment, right? Now, big question, should I quit before I get the visa? Okay, I'm gonna answer you by showing screenshots of people who were asking this in Spainguru's non-lucrative visa group, okay? Is renting out a property considered a job? Normally not, but size matters. If you have 30 properties on Airbnb, they will consider it that it is a business, right? If you only have 1 or 2 properties renting on a long-term basis, it's passive income, okay? There's no operations involved. So if you're somewhere in... Just a quick moment. Over 60% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. That's a lot of people getting value without hitting that button. If my videos have helped you understand Spain's immigration process, visas, or life here, even just once, please subscribe now. I'm working hard to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and your click truly makes a difference. Thanks so much. Now, let's keep going. In the middle, careful, right? Maybe you need to appoint a property manager to take care of the daily operations, right? And make sure that you get only the passive income. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, but don't get paid for it. Now, I mentioned showing you some screenshots depending on the consulate for people asking this question, right? Someone says a P45 for the UK consulates is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date. Okay, so some people show a letter to HR saying, yes, upon granting of this visa, I plan to leave on a certain date, okay, and I'm not going to be working, okay, and that has been accepted in the past, all right? But many people report being requested to provide a P45, okay, so having resigned as a condition to issue the non-lucrative visa in the UK. Looks like a bit of a potluck, says Pauline, if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if you're working up to the last minute, okay? And then many people are asking this in different consulates, like Leslie was asking in Manchester. I heard that in London you can show an HR letter, but is it also true for Manchester? There's no conclusive answer, right? No conclusive answer in the UK. They most of the time want a P45, or I've seen in many cases that they provide the letter from HR and then they got a request with only 10 days period, okay? That's saying like, you need to provide a P45 for your visa to be granted. And then people provide it and their visa is granted, right? Now for the US, they're more open to this situation, and many write on their official requirements on their website that, you know, if you are a working age or employed, you can just submit a letter of termination from the employer stating that the applicant will no longer work for that company, or if you are a sabbatical year, acceptance letter from the employer. So even sabbatical years are open to it. The termination letter must be in Spanish, an official translation from a strong translator. Some people in the Los Angeles consulate also provide an HR notarized letter of intent. Sorry, not an HR, just a letter of intent where you promise that you will quit if you obtain the visa before leaving to Spain. So it depends, but there are also some ugly cases. For example, this person in Houston in June 2025, Houston rejected the application because the retirement, even if it was still in the future, the retirement was in the future, even if it was planned to be before the visa start request, they denied this person, okay? So this is the case of Houston. This person in Washington, D.C. is a young applicant, okay? They require the resignation proof dated before the visa start and a sworn statement of no work in Spain, okay? So depending on the consulate and depending on the officer, there are more open or less open to this situation. And in the case of, this is the Buenos Aires consulate, a Venezuelan applicant applied for the non-lucrative visa and the applicant was rejected because he or she showed activity on LinkedIn. This person went to court in Madrid for this decision, okay, went to appeal, and the court in Madrid said that the consulate was right, okay, because this person showed intention of working, right? So be careful with that. This is very tricky at the consulate. It's working and applying for a non-lucrative visa, even if you should be in your right to say, I want to apply for the non-lucrative visa for a year, stay in Spain, use my savings. I have $1 million in the bank. I don't need to work. And then, you write in your letter of intent, you are being honest with the consulate, like, yeah, and then I want to go back to the States and continue working. I've seen people being denied because of this, okay? Even if it's in their total right to write it, okay? And they just want to be honest, okay? So be careful how you frame it, be careful how you word it. And if you're in this situation, go with legal help, okay? Because you will be adding friction to your process if you don't do it correctly, okay? Now, let's talk about marriage birth certificates and non-married couples. Married couples will need a valid and updated certificate, so new copy, usually 6 months valid, but many people state 3 months valid, okay, depending on the consulate and then the certificate. Also, if you're planning to move with children, new copies of their birth certificates with the same validity periods. Non-married couples can apply, but they need to prove their relationship, okay? So the first and best is if you went to the notary and you became legal partners, right? Notary or any other official authority, that's the best, okay? You have a strong case, but if you don't even have that, you're just stable partners, you could also potentially prove that you're stable partners and be accepted as a couple if you show at least 1 year of cohabitation, or if you have children together, okay? And any other documentation that can prove that you're a couple. But you're making a case and you could be not accepted as a couple, and potentially you have to apply as 2 main applicants. That could also happen, right? Now, every certificate of this kind needs to be apostilled by the country that issued them or authority that issued them and sworn translated. If you marry in the States, normally it's a state apostille issued by the state that married you, right? What about adult children, more than 18 years old and ascendants? They cannot be dependents any longer and must apply as main applicants as of May 20th, 2025. This is one of the bad changes of the last Reglamento de Extranjería update. And this is the Article 61 that you can see underlined in red, everything that I just mentioned. But if you want to see the law, you can read it here. Now, what are sworn translators? We have mentioned them all the time. These are different translators, just not normal translators, right? Sworn translators are accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They pass a very difficult exam to become certified by this ministry. Each of these sworn translators has a unique registration number. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including the consulates. And all these translations are done remotely and signed by a legally binding e-signature, okay, or electronic signature. So you don't need to send any documents overseas to get them sworn translated. Just scan them or use the PDFs and send by email, and then you receive a copy of those PDFs with a stamp, with the sworn translation and everything, and that you can print it out, and that's what you submit, okay? But you don't send things in snail mail overseas to a Spanish sworn translator. Now, if you need recommended, very experienced sworn translators that are also very affordable, you can go on Spainguru.es. You can find several options for all the language pairs. So if you got married in Germany and you want to sworn translate from German to Spanish, you can also find it on Spainguru.es, okay? To give you an example, right? Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? The answer is no, okay? And I mentioned this because Miami and Los Angeles mentioned the American Translator Association as an option for officially translating documents, and it is misleading, okay? Don't believe that, all right? You need to use a sworn translator that was appointed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Can sworn translators work with several language pairs? No, they only work in one pair, okay? English, Spanish, Spanish, English is one pair, for example, right? How much do sworn translations cost? For the typical documents that people usually provide for the non-lucrative visa is around 40 euros per page, okay? But it will depend on how fast you need them and the complexity of the documents. What comes first, apostille and then sworn translation? Okay, I will tell you what an experienced immigration lawyer will tell you. First, you obtain the original document. Then you obtain the apostille of the original document, and then you send both document and apostille and sworn translate both. This is what you have to do. Now, some people choose not to do this, okay? And they're taking a risk, and most of the time it goes well, and they just sworn translate the original document, but they don't sworn translate the apostille, okay? This is also done, right? But I wouldn't recommend it, okay? Because it could create friction. Now, it is true that sworn translations are not cheap, exactly, and people choose to take little risks, okay? But they could bring friction or some headaches, right? If you work with a lawyer, usually lawyers, like big lawyers, like in the case of Sterna Abogados, they have an in-house sworn translator, and this translator translates every single document for you, included in the pack price. Okay, so in order to avoid any type of friction according to translations. And also, a lot of people are asking, like, should I sworn translate bank statements? Because there are 100 pages. I'm not going to spend 4,000 euros in sworn translations, right? So many people decide not to sworn translate them. I ran a poll on Spainguru, and 77% of people said I didn't sworn translate the bank statements. But some people go midway, right? They only sworn translated the summary pages, that maybe 2 of them, right? Some 3% sworn translated everything. Some other people had banks that could provide statements in Spanish. This is the case of Chase in the US. I don't know if anywhere else. Okay, so this is the situation, right? About sworn translating the statements. As I said, I highly recommend you sworn translating everything, right? But of course, it could be very expensive, so you need to, in that case, well, take some risks. Now, a friendly reminder about Spainguru's YouTube channel. If you watch Spainguru's YouTube channel, this is actually not updated. I have more than 1,000 videos now, where about half of them are about the Spanish non-lucrative visa. 1 video per day, where I tell you pills of knowledge about this visa, the process, the renewals, and everything. So join the channel, subscribe, watch the videos, because they will give you more and more information about this visa and keep you updated. And if you plan to leave earlier before we finish the webinar, please don't forget to leave a Trustpilot review. It will make my day, will make me extremely happy, and motivate me so much, and also help others to find this content. Now, let's continue. We only have half an hour left. Ask your questions in the chat if you want. During the application. Now, the application process. All the family members must apply. Consider in-person application, or sometimes, especially when working with BLS, they can send you the passport back to your home if you pay for the service. Or sometimes they will ask you to personally pick up the passports, and all the family members need to go to pick up the passport in person with the visa inside. Will depend on the consulate. Some consulates only deal by mail. Okay, this is the case of Panama Consulate, for example. Used to be the case of San Francisco, not any longer. San Francisco now works with BLS. Some consulates use a combination of mail and personal appointment, for example. And remember that once you obtain the visa, you will obtain a paper on your passport that will give you a certain validity period. Now, recently, they extended the visa validity period to 365 days, 1 year, okay? But it is not clear whether you can enter Spain anytime during those 365 days. The recommendation is to enter within the first 90 days, as it used to be, okay? I have a video where I interview Ainhoa Manero that you can watch today, where I talk about this, and I recently asked her an update about this situation. Okay, and let me see, I didn't get the update, but basically, she's recommending all her customers to enter Spain within the first 90 days until she gets an official clarification from the authorities that they can enter anytime during those 365 days. Okay, I highly don't recommend you entering after 90 days of the visa start, basically. Okay, and this person puts it very simply. Okay, why they increased this validity period from 90 days was very clear, until 1 year, right? It is to allow freedom of movement while waiting for a physical residency card, which sometimes can take a couple of months due to backlog, lack of appointments with the police stations. Once the card is issued, the visa becomes invalid. The entry to Spain and applying for a residency card should be within 90 days of the start date on the visa. It is quite summarizing of the situation, right? So until we don't get this clarification from the authorities, stay on the safe side, enter Spain within 90 days of the visa start date, even if it was granted for 1 year. Now, some common mistakes to avoid in the non-lucrative visa process. First of all, not checking specific consulate requirements. Check all these requirements and compare them, and do it regularly. Your consulate's English requirements, your consulate requirements in Spanish, the BLS requirements, okay, if they work with BLS, and also the internal requirements. These are the requirements that are not written anywhere. Okay, that people report once they apply for the visa, and they go back to the Facebook groups and say, hey guys, did you know what? I also got required this tax form, okay, from 3 years ago. It was not in the official requirements, but I got requested it, and now I have a headache. Those are the internal requirements that are never written anywhere, but you will be required to apply, okay? Now, if you go with a lawyer and everything, you could fight for that, but most people just choose to comply. Then, showing wrong documents. expired documents, okay, outside of the validity periods, wrong chronology, starting with the easy stuff and leaving the hard stuff at the end, showing wrong health insurance with co-payments, with reimbursements sometimes, okay, or a local health insurance that you think it was compliant. Say that you plan to work, or you didn't convince them enough or showed enough proof that you will not be working under the non-lucrative visa, as we saw the different nuances before in the past slides. Now let's talk about timings. When do I start? When do I start with all this process, right? So the most important dates should be the intended moving date to Spain, okay? And before that, let's say the personal appointment date at the consulate, right? So if you take the intended moving date to Spain, at the very least start 6 months before. I'm talking about US and Canada, to leave enough time to gather documents, to leave enough time to get the appointment with the consulate and the processing time, okay? 6 months, more or less, roughly. Most consulates will retain passports during the processing, something to have into account if you need to travel. US applicants can get a second passport quite easily, okay, while their passport is at the consulate or BLS office. Whereas the UK is hard to get a second passport because applying for a visa at another country is not one of the conditions, okay? But sometimes BLS may allow UK applicants to keep theirs by filling a form. I know that Manchester has this option, but I don't know if all the other consulates also have it in the UK. But usually it was not very clear. It was hit or miss. When people said or made a case why they need to give their passport, sometimes BLS let them do it, sometimes they didn't. And now apparently they are pushing forward one form where you request to keep it to the consulate and BLS then lets you keep it. This case of Manchester. Now, let's go a little bit more granular. Documents preparation, 2 to 3 months. Attending the appointment on the 3rd month. Wait for the approval. Depends. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's more than 3 months. Take an average of 2 months approximately for processing time. Could be anything. If they require extra documentation, they will only give you a 10-day period to provide it. You can choose the visa start date in a 90-day window from the application date. And this is changing also, okay? I will tell you why it's changing, what are the new rules. And officially, once you enter Spain with a visa, you will have officially 30 days to obtain the residency card, the plastic card with your face that you put your fingerprints at the police station. So you have 30 days to obtain it. That will be valid for 1 year, usually from the day in which you enter Spain, holding the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Some other things that not many people talk about is that, for example, you can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance. However, the difficulty I found was finding health insurance companies who work that far out, as most only do 2, and many now do only 1 in advance, right? Solution for this: pay attention to when, how flexible they are, or you can also use Spainguru's recommended exclusive agent. As I told you, he can extend the visa start, the policy start date, okay? Now let's see some visual slides about how the process looks like. You submit on date A, for example, and each of those segments is 1 month, right? Normally you can submit your paperwork, and in the form you can say, I want the visa to start in the future, not now, okay, but in the future, right? How much in the future? Up to 90 days from the submission date, right? This is changing now as we speak. Now imagine that you apply on letter A and you say, I want it to start in 3 months. The consulate approves your visa and you decide to fly to Spain on letter B, okay? Sometime on the 3rd month, in the middle of the 3rd month. Excuse me. And the consulate issues the visa with the start date on letter B, okay? Now, start date on the letter B gives you a window of 90 days to enter Spain. Now it will be 1 year, but recommended 90 days. Within those 90 days, you decide to travel to Spain on letter C, which is almost before the 3rd month ends, okay? And once you enter Spain, you have 30 days to obtain your TA card, which no one does. We'll look at that, okay? But once you obtain your TA card, the police officer will normally start your TA, your residency when you enter Spain. From the day you enter Spain, 1 year after, that's when the residency card expires. And you will have to renew that residency during the 1st year, and you can start a renewal 60 days prior to the expiration date of your TA card and up to 90 days after it expired. But there are several reasons why you should start as early as possible. We'll talk about that too. Another way to see the process, okay, and this is for information purposes only, there could be overlappings, but let's talk chronologically. First, you find your consulate where you can apply. Two, you check official requirements. Third, you start with the difficult stuff, the police check, okay. Third, the medical certificate. Four, you need to apostille when necessary and sworn translate. Then you sort out your private health insurance or S1 form if you're a UK pensionist. Then you book your consulate appointment, which usually takes long time to get an appointment, so you should start even earlier than this, okay? Then you attend the appointment, you submit your paperwork, you wait for your notification, that's the processing, you obtain your visa, okay, you collect it, and then you fly to Spain, and one recommendation, you get an empadronamiento. This is registration of your address in the city hall in the city where you live, of your rental contract, and then you use that empadronamiento to get your residency card. Another way to see it is a Gantt chart, okay? As you can see in blue, you have the different validity periods, so you need to have that in mind. First, you start with the police check, marriage certificate, birth certificates, then you will apostille everything, so translate everything, make sure that the validity periods are within are okay when you do the appointment, right? Which is the dotted line in red. You get the financial documents, bank statements, medical certificates, you get the health insurance, and then you also start getting your appointments. You have your personal appointment, processing period, and then you move to Spain and you start your visa coverage. Another way to see it, right? Now, some updates for the process. Applications must now be submitted no later than 2 months before your planned arrival in Spain. Unless exceptional reasons justify a shorter time frame, you can submit your application as early as 6 months and up to 2 months prior to your intended entry date. These are new rules that I haven't seen people mentioning it. Okay, so it is probably a transition time right now, but yeah, it is new rules. And also, something that is new is that there is a decision deadline of 1 month after when the documents were received by the BLS office and the consulate and they sent to Spain. Okay, 1 month. That after 1 month, you could, let's say there is an administrative silence, which technically it is considered to be rejected, but in practice it is not. It is being processed. Okay, so don't consider it is rejected. But after 1 month of that, your application have been received, you could potentially initiate a process of asking for a decision, okay, for your process, right? So take all this information with a pinch of salt because it is quite new, and we're seeing all the consulates transitioning into these new timelines. And here you can check the Article 63 that speaks about all this that I just mentioned to you. Now let's go back to taxes, and one of the most important taxes is capital gains tax, especially for people who are planning to sell their homes in their home countries and then move to Spain. Basically, there is a way to avoid capital gains tax in Spain. There are ways to mitigate it if you're older than 65 years old, if it's your primary residence, if you use the proceeds to buy and purchase property in Spain, etc. But the best way is to avoid it altogether. The best way to do it is to avoid being a Spanish tax resident during the same calendar year in which you sold your home, right? And there are two different scenarios. The easiest one, you sell in December and you move to Spain in January. January is a new tax calendar year, right? So you were not a Spanish tax resident when you sold your home in December. The second one is a bit trickier because you know that the first condition to become a Spanish tax resident is that you spend 183 days plus in Spain, and every immigration status counts as a tourist, etc. So be careful if you did scouting tricks at the beginning of the year, those days count, right? So for example, if you haven't been in Spain in the whole year and you sold your home in January, you got your visa in April, you moved on 2nd of July onwards, and you haven't been in Spain before, you will not become a Spanish tax resident because you only have 182 days left in that year. Okay, so this is the other scenario. If you want to know more about this tax and many other taxes, and join my webinar that I have every 15 days or every 3 weeks about Spanish taxes, this is absolutely free. I highly recommend you reading all this, watching the videos, and joining the webinar. Now let's talk about after the approval of the non-lucrative visa. Living in Spain. How you arrive to Spain? First, from outside of Schengen or from inside Schengen? From outside of Schengen, you will get the Spanish stamp on your visa. That's great. If you arrive from within Schengen, for example, you fly from New York to Frankfurt, and then you fly from Frankfurt to Spain, you will not get Spanish authority stamp because from Frankfurt to Spain, it is within Schengen, you don't get passport control, right? The best way you can do to get proof that you entered on a certain date is go to a police station within the airport or close to the border to sign a paper called Declaración de Entrada. It's a one-page document that the police signs, okay, and stamps saying that you entered on a certain date, and that will be useful when you get your residency card to prove to the policeman that you entered on a certain date, okay? Now, recommended always enter within the 90 days of visa validity window unless the authorities clarify that you can do otherwise. Next tip, get a Spanish SIM card. You will get SMS from Spanish authorities that are necessary for your procedures. Open a non-resident bank account to pay your rentals, your utilities, etc. Obtain the empadronamiento with a rental contract. Not all rental contracts are valid. Usually most ayuntamientos or city halls accept only contracts more than 6 months length, okay, for empadronamiento. So make sure that you can get your empadronamiento before you sign your lease. And then officially you have 30 days to get your residency card at the police station or at a foreign office. Now, let's talk about some frequently asked questions. Is the padrón strictly necessary to obtain the TIE? And people say there are no appointments to obtain the TIE. What should I do? Before we talk about that, here's the Declaración de Entrada that I just mentioned. I have an article on how to fill it up. Okay, you can print it out, fill it up. If you're planning to enter Spain from inside Schengen, get this visa, Declaración de Entrada filled up, print it out, go to the police station and make them sign it, okay? Not all the police stations know about this. Usually the ones at the airport or close to the border know it, but if you go to any other police station, they will think that you are talking in Chinese. So be careful with that. Many people say that. And as I mentioned before, a lot of people say that there are no TIE appointments. They're very hard to get. There are no options open online. You can always request an appointment within the same province where you're living, okay? So it doesn't have to be in the specific city where you are, but within the same province, okay? And to address the previously frequently asked question that I just mentioned, I can get an appointment. What can I do? Is the padrón strictly necessary to obtain the TIE? And this is a lawyer who I am mentioning. In practice, it is not required to obtain the TIE in 1 month. No one almost does. Appointments can take several months, even up to 6 months without issue. So the sooner the better, but there's no immediate rush in obtaining it. Now, another tip, once you obtain your TIE card, get your digital certificate, okay? This is a certificate that you install in your computer that will help you do procedures online, such as the renewal of your visa, okay? I recently released a video about this that you can find on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Is the empadronamiento strictly necessary to obtain the TIE? In 90% of cases, yes. Many police stations will require it. The largest police stations know it is not really a requirement to obtain a TIE, an empadronamiento to obtain the TIE. And you can show a rental contract, you can show an Airbnb receipt, okay? But in 90 or more % of police stations will require an empadronamiento. So be careful with that. The renewal process, as I said, the first year, after 1 year, when the TIE expires, the tarjeta de residencia, 60 days before the expiration, you should start your renewal process. Most of cases, you do it online by yourself or using a gestor or lawyer who can sign on your behalf. But if you're going to do it online, you have to get your digital certificate. Then after the first renewal, you will get 2 more years of residency. Then you will have another renewal and 2 more years of residency, total 5 years of residency. Right, and remember that potentially you have to show double the amount of financial threshold if you're in certain provinces, especially if you're applying only with savings, right? And after the 5 years, you could potentially apply for the long-term residency, which is much easier and gives you, it is much better than having the non-lucrative residency, right? Now, as of May 20th, 2025, there is a minimum stay requirement of 193 days in an immigration year in order to be able to renew a non-lucrative visa. But this is a gray area because there's a Supreme Court ruling saying that there shouldn't be any minimum stay requirement included in the Reglamento de Extranjería, in the bylaw, in the lower hierarchy law. It should be included in the main law, the Ley Orgánica 4/2000. Therefore, this is not enforceable. So there is legal ambiguity about this requirement. And I also have interviewed Ainhoa Manero about the minimum stay requirements. And she says that, no, you don't have to comply with the minimum stay requirement to renew your visa. Now, if you're going to apply for long-term residency or Spanish citizenship, you have minimum stay requirements that you need to comply. You need to be very careful. But for the sole purpose of renewing your non-lucrative residency, you don't need to comply with this minimum stay requirement because this Supreme Court ruling. okay? I have a video about that, right? Therefore, you don't need to become a Spanish tax resident during the first or second year, okay? If you and you can still renew your visa. But if these are your plans, make sure to engage with an experienced lawyer like Anoa, for example, that I recommend on Spainguru.es. Now, case study for the renewal, and I need to finish in about 7 minutes, so I'm gonna go very, very fast. I have a few slides left. I'm sorry for it. It's a very special day, first day of school for my kids, so I need to go. Unfortunately, I don't have anyone else to go pick them up, so I'm very, very sorry for that. I didn't calculate well, but yes, please understand. And if you have any questions, you always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, and I will answer you the question for sure. Now, renewal process. Imagine that you're a couple. You need to show in a province that requires double the amount, 36,000 euros in 2 years, right? Per year. Therefore, you need to show 70,000 euros, okay, of funding. Now, imagine that the main applicant is receiving a pension of 30,000 euros annually. Therefore, in 2 years, this person has 60,000 euros. Therefore, they only need an addition of 12,000 euros to reach 72,000 euros. That could be savings. It could be rental income. It could be dividends. It could be credit in your credit card that is readily accessible without penalties, right? Some people know that rental income is not considered safe income by the authorities because tenants could stop paying you, so it is not widely accepted. Although people say that, oh, I have renewed only with rental income, right? It's quite erratic in that sense. And the documentation requirements for the renewal. Ongoing private medical insurance coverage could be public or it could be compliant NLV private health insurance, updated passport copies for both individuals, ongoing health coverage, and no police records from Spain. Okay, so driving under the influence, stuff like that, could lead to denials. And for the renewals, yes, you will need an empadronamiento in most cases. Now, what are the minimum state requirements for the different other procedures that I just mentioned? For the renewal, gray area, you don't need to spend minimum 183 days per calendar year, okay, as per the Supreme Court decision, okay, as I mentioned. But if you're planning to obtain the long-term residency after 5 years, you cannot be outside of Spain for more than 10 months in the previous 5 years in order to obtain it. So be careful with that. Okay, and those 10 months don't need to be consecutive, but it cannot be more than 6 months in one block, right? Now, potentially you could renew for a third period your non-lucrative residency, but not all regions accept it. For example, Galicia doesn't accept it, okay? Now, if you're planning to go for the Spanish nationality, sometimes you are dual passport holder of a country that accepts applying for nationality after only 2 years of your residency. Countries in red, Latin American countries, Philippines, and so much more, they benefit from the 2-year fast track. Otherwise, you need to wait for the residency at least 10 years, right? Now, if you're applying for the Spanish nationality, if you're holder of a temporary residency like non-lucrative visa, you cannot be outside of Spain more than 3 months per year, okay? And if you're a holder of a long-term residency, you cannot be outside of the EU for more than 1 year consecutively or no more than 30 months in 5 years, okay? Now, if you're planning to transition to a work permit, there are several ways. The 3 most common ones are a work permit, okay, for cuenta propia, which is your own business, okay, as a contract, yes, you're establishing your own business. You need to submit a business plan. You need to be accepted. It is not an easy thing. You need to go with legal help. You don't have to, but I highly recommend you doing so. It's not automatic, but after 1 year, the best way to do it is that you will renew your non-lucrative visa. You will get your residency, your non-lucrative residency approved for 2 years. And after you get the approval, you apply for the modification for a work permit. So in case it doesn't go well, you still have your non-lucrative residency to let you live in Spain legally and have an interrupted residency in order to apply for the long term after 5 years, okay? So the different pathways is if submitting a business plan, if you're planning to open your own business, or if you receive a job offer from a company from Spain. It's called Cuenta Ajena, company that is ready to sponsor you, okay? Potentially that could also be an option. The third one is controversial, is the digital nomad visa, because you need to show at least 3 months of working remotely for non-Spanish companies, which is controversial because supposedly you shouldn't have been working remotely, but people do. As I mentioned before, it's a gray area, and people are transitioning sometimes from the non-lucrative residency to the digital nomad visa, okay? Now remember, you can always reach out to me on at hello@spainguru.es. Join the newsletter, watch the YouTube channel, read the articles in the blog post, join the Facebook groups, okay? Read the different sections that I have for absolutely free, more webinars, the Move to Spain checklist, destinations, and all the vetted professionals that I offer you on Spainguru. If you need help with your visa processing, just consulting, just checking that your documentation is fine, or any other related service in your process, of course, you can find them on Spainguru.es. This is a slide that shows basically a poll. 50% of people apply by themselves, 50% went with legal help. I asked the ones who went with legal help, was it a good investment? 80% said yes. And again, let's stay in touch at hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails, and we only have 1 minute left. I really need to go. I'm sorry for that. Normally I would allow half an hour for Q&A session, but I really appreciate that you made the time today. I need to go. If you think that the information I shared with you today is useful, please leave a review on Trustpilot, and then I will send you the recording of this webinar in a few hours. You will receive it in your email. Thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate it, especially for the ones who woke up early to join. And I wish you good luck and take care. Thank you. Goodbye.